guys, what are we gonna do today? Today we're gonna make this fun piece of art. You could frame it, leave it plain. I kind of like that it's just kind of funky and hanging out here. Just a piece of corrugated cardboard, but I'm using my new Roycycled Cloche stencil, plus my new Roycycled Christmas masterboard paper. It has so many cool images in it. You could just whip out like 5 or 6 of these from one sheet of paper. You want to see how? Well, let's get started. I'm taking this piece of corrugated cardstock and I am going to paint the smooth side of this. I'll be using my new Cloche stencil. So depending on if you're going to use this stencil or if you have your own or just going to draw it out, that's what will determine the size you're going to need for your background board. Spray this a bit. I'm using my DIY paint and I'm just spraying a little water on this just to get the paint to move a bit. I don't want to completely saturate this since this is cardboard. I'm going to add some crinoline to this too. So while it's still wet, I'm adding a little of this other color in also so it blends together. And I'm also going to add just a little bit of gray to this. Okay, I'm just going to let this dry and we're going to move on. This is my Roycycled Christmas masterboard paper and I really like this. So we had already done one using this deer and I think we're either going to use him or the birds. I think we may just use the birds this time. And I'm also using my new Roycycled Cloche stencil. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to lightly draw around the outside edges of this onto my paper and then we are going to cut it out. I'm going to line it up where I want it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the outside edge. There we go, and I'm just drawing around this outside edge. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut this out. I'm cutting on my drawn lines. So I cut out on my trace lines. I left this part a little whiter because I really wanted this paper to show through nice. And it's completely dry. And double, triple check. Yep, so I am going to decoupage this paper right here. So I have it so far down because I'm going to making a cute sign that I'm going to put at the top. But depending where you put this, you could put it up on top and put your sign below or just however you would like to do it. So you can use whatever decoupage medium you would like. I'm just using this one that I've made up and it's a mix between like a Mod Podge and a gel medium. I'm going to do the back of my paper. Okay, so I did about half of it there. Now I'm gonna do the other half. And I was gonna put it on another medium, like a cardstock or something and put it on, but I really like the look. You can see the corrugation through it. Let this dry just a little bit. It should dry fairly quickly. And then what I'm gonna do is I am going to stencil the Cloche over this. So I've lined my stencil up, and I think I'm pretty close here over my decoupage paper. I am going to use the stencil and stencil around the whole outside. I'm not going to be stenciling the inside pieces here. I put repositionable low-tack spray on this. So I am going to lay this down. I'm going to let it set up just a little bit so it's not too tacky. So I'm going to use some black paint and I'm using a stencil brush. Try to get most of your paint off of your brush and then we are just going to stipple up and down all the way around this. And we're not doing the inside elements. You know what, and then I'm just going to speckle just a tad bit of white over this. So you can see just a little bit of the white that's peeking through. So I'm just using a piece of my 11 by 17 paper. It's just a heavier weight paper. I think I'm just gonna say Christmas night. I'm gonna block off part of this when I stencil. Start with the Christmas. So we're doing more of a pouncing up and down on this. Let's do night. It's here and here so I don't accidentally get those. Let this dry really quickly. So this is dry and I am just going to cut this apart. Make it just a little bit smaller. And I'm not overly concerned if it's perfectly straight. So here's my little sign, and what I'm gonna do is use my vintage texture stamp from my OD, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of a just crackle on here. And then we are going to add a little bit of distressing to that. This is Vintage Photo Distress Oxide that I'm using. We're gonna seal it, but we're gonna seal this and our larger piece at the same time. So I will put this aside. So I'm gonna take some of this smooth side of this corrugated cardboard and I'm going to rip some of it off. In the holes at the bottom, I'm putting a knitting needle and then you can just kind of rip. Anything pointy works. We have done a few other videos doing this technique if you'd like to also see something a little more in depth on this. So I am just going to be doing this in areas around the cloche. I don't want to do anything in here. So you can do as much or as little of this as you would like, depending on how distressed you would like your piece to look. So I ripped that. I'm going to go back over. I've watered my brush down quite a bit. Add a little more of this off-white. We're mostly covering the parts that I just ripped off. Then I'm going to be adding some gray into that also. So be careful going over this, or you can just take a piece of paper and cover this so you don't accidentally get paint on your pretty decoupage paper. Now while this is wet, I'm going to use my grays again. So I am going to splatter a bit of black and white paint on this. This is still wet, and I don't mind that because we're going to have to let the whole thing dry. So when I'm splattering, I'm mixing my paint and I'm adding some water to it. And usually what I suggest is try it in one spot to see how well the brush is loaded. Otherwise, you may end up with a massive big splat because you had a huge amount of paint on there that you didn't realize. And I'm going to do the same thing with this off-white. I'm going to mix a bit of paint with this water. Okay, I think we are done here, and we are going to let this completely dry. So this is completely dry, and now we're going to do our last bit of antiquing. I'm using my Vintage Photo Oxide, and I'm going up and down and all through. See how that fills in? Isn't that cool? And I am going to go through here. And then I'm actually going to use a new color, Black Soot. And I'm kind of just going in just a bit. I don't use this one very often. You need to make sure, and you have to use a little bit of care because it is so dark. I am not going to be putting any of the black inside the cloche, just on the outside edge. And I use the brown everywhere. So when I use my sealer on this, it's going to really help move this around. So let's get our sealer on this guy and see how we did. I'm going to seal my Christmas night first, really, really quick, and put it aside. And see how that's moving, that antiquing? Okay, I'm going to set this aside. Now we're going to work on this. Now the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to do the center of this. It does not have the black, because if I started with the black, I don't want to be moving the black into the center of my cloche. So I'm just going to kind of do this. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the outside. Now this black will probably move quite a bit, so that's why I did the inside first. Okay, I'm gonna go around these edges. See that? It really moves. And I kind of need to wipe this off before I move on. I just want to go one way and not overwork this black. So the antiquing really moves, the black really moves. So you want to be real careful and try not to overwork that. I'm just going to let this completely dry, and after it completely dries, we are going to put our little sign on. So here's my little sign, and I'm just gonna, you can lay it completely flat out, you could have it, I just kind of am rolling this up and down along my fingers and making a little bit of a curve. I didn't want to scrunch it all up. You could do it at an angle. You could do it straight across, whatever you would like. I am just gonna put a couple staples in this, in one end and in the other. And going through the corrugated cardboard, and this is like a mini staple, it holds it nice and tightly, and you don't even barely notice it. There you go. Did you guys think that was fun? Hopefully you can take a few of the techniques that we just showed you. You can see in this one it's a little bit lighter, and I used another block of the paper using the deer. And on here's one we just did with the birds. But this one's a little darker, this is a little lighter. You can make it bigger, smaller, use different words as a heading. Maybe just cut the Cloche out of heavy cardstock, put a little box behind it, and you could have a shelf full of cute Cloches with cute Christmas items in them. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you guys give this a try, but whatever you do, have fun.